That day, the sky was neither rainy nor sunny. Paolo returned to the old cafe, where for over a year he had sat with Clara, the 92-year-old woman who changed his view on aging. But today, the window seat was empty. No pale scarf, no steady yet trembling hand holding a cup of tea. He asked the familiar barista, "Is Clara not coming today?" The young woman offered him a faded brown envelope with a sad smile. "She left this, said if you come back, give it this." Paolo opened the letter. The handwriting was shaky but clear, imbued with her quiet dignity, just like her. "If you're reading this, I may have already gone far away, but don't be sad. I'm not bringing any sorrow with me. I'm only leaving a few things behind. If you want to know why I could still live and still smile each morning, remember 7 things I've never done." A chill ran down his spine. He looked around, half expecting to see her step out from behind the cafe, her smile as gentle as the breeze. He read on. "I've lived 92 years, not because I'm strong, but because I refuse to let life harden me. What I'm about to share isn't a secret to longevity, nor is it profound wisdom. They're simply things I never did, and because of them, I can still sing a small song each morning." Paolo folded the letter, placed a hand over his heart. Something within him had just awakened. He was ready to begin the story, and so are you. Clara won't teach you how to live long, but perhaps she'll make you want to live fully every remaining day, with all the gentleness of someone who has walked through 9 decades of life. Paolo read the first line of Clara's letter as though she was seated before him, her voice slow and resolute. "The first thing I never did," she wrote, "was to regret the past." He looked up and through the window. Outside, an elderly couple held hands as they passed by. Quiet steps, but deeply bonded. Paolo thought of Clara, the woman who lost her husband at 51 and once told him about years when she thought there was no way out. "I lost my husband to cancer, loved the wrong person after that, trusted the wrong friend," Clara wrote. "Those things aren't something I'm proud of, but I also refuse to let them steal the light of my remaining days." The words stuck in Paolo's throat. He knew well that feeling, that of holding on too tightly to the past, unable to release it, unable to forgive, even himself. Clara shared that in the early years after her husband passed, she couldn't get out of bed in the morning. Everything felt cloaked in fog. At times, she thought this might be her life, until a February morning, when sunlight filtered through her window, she sat up, picked up a pen, and wrote a single line. "I'm thankful for that because I survived it." From that day on, whenever painful memories returned, Clara didn't push them away. She simply wrote, quietly, "I'm thankful because I'm still alive." She didn't deny the past, but she didn't let it imprison her. "Memories are to be remembered, not repeated or trapped in," she wrote next. Paolo folded the letter once more and sat in silence for a long time. Inside him, something was rearranging. He had believed that to live peacefully, you had to forget. But Clara didn't forget. She rewrote the endings, choosing gratitude over regret. That evening, back at home, Paolo opened his notebook under the soft glow of a lamp. He wrote his first line, "I am thankful for the person who left me, because they taught me to stand again." When he set his pen down, something inside his chest unclenched, lightly, very lightly. Clara hadn't exaggerated. There are small things which, if we don't do, can keep us alive for a long time. Paolo flipped to the second page. Clara's handwriting seemed to smile at him through the ink. "I never judged others, not even myself." A simple sentence that brought Paolo to a halt, because he knew exactly how judgment doesn't require words. Sometimes it's just a glance, a passing thought, a sense of "I am right" in response to someone's awkwardness. Clara shared how for a long time she blamed herself for not saving her marriage. After her husband died, she felt she should have noticed his illness sooner, made him see a doctor, done more. She tormented herself over his grumpiness toward the end and her own silence. I became a defendant in the court of my own memories until the day I realized I did all I could at that time. It was only after she let go of self-judgment that she could genuinely smile at others' mistakes. Paulo recalled a day when a young woman, dressed flamboyantly, entered the cafe. People whispered and shook their heads, but Clara simply smiled, gently set her tea down and said, "Each person is an unwritten story. I'm not the editor."
Clara never commented on tattoos, frowned at arguments, or turned away when hearing a life story unlike her own. She just quietly listened, and if curious, she asked, but she never judged. Paulo closed the letter and reflected on himself, how often he frowned at his son for living differently, or silently judged his ex-wife's decisions that didn't match his expectations. Yet he never asked, aren't they also doing their best, in their own way, just as I did? That night, he added in his journal, I don't need to understand everyone. I just need to learn not to judge them, or myself. A simple line, but the start of a new, gentler, and more peaceful way of living, like Clara. Clara once said, I'm not late, I'm living. Paulo heard this when he asked if she feared being late for appointments. She showed up 20 minutes late to the cafe that day, yet strolled in as if time were a meeting friend, not a chaser. Paulo, a former finance professional, lived by overlapping time zones, back-to-back calls, meetings filling weekends. Even retired, he wore a smartwatch, not for exercise, but to track how much he'd got done. But Clara lived as if the clock had no power. She told him each morning she didn't plan. She listened to the sunlight. If the sky is gray, I turn on a lamp and read. If the sun is gentle, I bring tea out into the garden and walk among the leaves. I measure time by light during the day, she wrote in her letter, and I have never found myself in a hurry. Once, under her bougainvillea trellis, leaves fell gently around them. Clara pointed and said, they fall exactly when they are meant to, neither early nor late. Clara didn't set alarms or make to-do lists, but she remembered her neighbor's birthday, the sick cat's name, and the scent of chrysanthemums she planted in 1983. Because she wasn't in a rush, she lived deeply. Every small thing found its full place in her memory. That night, inspired by her words about light and living, Paulo flipped his phone off completely. He stepped onto his balcony with coffee and stared at the stars. For the first time in years, time didn't feel frightening. It didn't rush by. It lingered in his breath, in the rustling leaves, in his full presence with himself. From then on, he began a new habit, one day each week without schedule. He called it Clara Day, a day to live, not to chase. Clara once told Paulo about a younger neighbor, 20 years her junior, who often criticized her gardening, saying the flowers were messy, the shared pathway was dirty. One day the neighbor confronted her, sharp and rude, "Don't you care that your front yard looks a mess?" Clara just smiled and said nothing. Paulo asked, "Weren't you angry?" Clara replied, "Of course I am. I'm human. But anger steals sleep, and I love my sleep." Later, she poured a pot of chamomile tea, took it out to the yard, and sat. No complaining, no ranting. She sat and let the breeze carry away the harsh words. Paulo paused, remembering the many times he argued with his wife over little things, forgetting the trash, a careless word, a disagreement over a movie. These minor fights often left such distance that nights in the same bed felt lonely, like two distant shores. He now realized those arguments barely matter when you're finally still. Clara didn't preach about forgiveness, she lived it. She didn't teach Paulo how to let go, she modeled it by staying silent at the right moments, smiling at the right times, and refusing to carry burdens that weighed her down. Paulo learned that forgiveness isn't for others, it's for your own peace. From then on, whenever something upset him, he tried Clara's method: tea, silence, reflection on whether his peace was worth the argument. More often than not, he chose sleep. Over time, he slept better. This transformation, from judgment to gentleness, from urgency to presence, was sparked by Clara's lived wisdom. Through simple yet profound acts, she gifted Paulo, and now you, a life that's not just endured, but deeply and rightfully lived. If this part of the story resonates, you might find inspiration in choosing kindness, choosing calm, and choosing to live fully, one moment at a time. Clara told Paulo that for many years there were mornings when she felt overwhelmed or her body ached, but she never skipped three things: making a cup of tea, opening the window, and writing one thing she was grateful for in her journal. Some mornings I felt dizzy from insomnia, or my back hurt so badly I didn't want to get out of bed, she shared. But I reminded myself, if I can still make tea and write, even a word, I am still living in the way I've chosen. She spoke it not as a lofty declaration, but as naturally as saying the sun still rises.
Paulo didn't fully get it at first. His mornings were always a rush: alarm clock, quick coffee, rushing out the door to start another day like all the others. But after meeting Clara, he began to try it. At first, just writing one simple line each morning. Not grand things, just, "I'm still breathing. Today is calm." It felt awkward at first, but then Paulo realized those lines changed how he saw the day, not as a to-do list, but as a small gift waiting to be appreciated. One day, after writing, "Thankful I heard birds singing," he looked up, and there was a little sparrow perched on the fence. Clara once told him, "When I do those three things, I don't feel like I'm merely existing. I feel like I'm really living." To her, tea wasn't just hot water and leaves, it was gentleness for her own soul. Gratitude notes weren't just reminders, they kept her heart from going numb to everyday wonders. Opening the window wasn't just for fresh air, it was proof that beauty never stops unfolding if you stop to look. Paulo stopped seeing mornings as bland preludes to busy days. Now he saw them as sacred moments, where he chose to begin with gratitude instead of urgency. Clara once sighed when Paulo talked about watching the news nightly. "I watched nearly 90 minutes of TV every evening for 15 years, she said. "I knew everything happening in the world, but I started forgetting how to look at the sky from my porch." She recounted a day sitting through a cooking show when a bird tapped at her window. That moment made her realize she hadn't actually seen real sunlight or trees for a week because her eyes were glued to the screen. After that, Clara limited TV to 30 minutes a day. Not to cut it out entirely, but to remind herself there's more to attention than screens. She filled that time by reading old books, sketching garden leaves with watercolor, or sitting quietly listening to birds and watching sunlight shift on the walls. She began to actually watch, she laughed. Watching leaves fall, people walking down the street, kids running in the schoolyard at dusk. No narrations, no background score, just these living moments made her soul feel brighter. Paulo followed suit, turning off the TV early one evening. For the first time in years, he sat in his living room with a cup of coffee, watching the sunset light fill the room. No news, no commentary, just the sound of wind. He realized, peace isn't on a screen, it's right outside your window. Clara once told Paulo by the coffee shop window, "I don't know how many days I have left. Maybe 5 years, maybe 5 weeks. But I know this, if I live today, I want at least one person in the world to smile because of me." She wasn't loud or showy, but she had a habit she never skipped over the years, planting a small seed of kindness each day. Sometimes it was a friendly greeting to the mail carrier with a homemade cookie. Sometimes a handwritten note left for the housekeeper. Thank you for making this home gentle. Sometimes a gentle hold on the cashier's hand asking, "How's your day going?" She called it a trace of kindness, not loud or flashy, but enough for someone to remember that they matter. She believed small joys can travel farther than grand sermons or grand gestures. Paolo thought it sounded too simple until he tried it. The next morning, he stopped at his usual bakery, looked at the young clerk, and said, "Thank you for your smile this morning. It brightened my day." The clerk looked surprised, then beamed brighter than usual. And Paolo, usually reserved with compliments, felt his heart open. That entire day, he didn't get irritated by traffic jams or bugged by slow emails. One simple sentence changed his world. He began to see why Clara not only lived long, she lived happily. Not because she did grand things, but because she never let a day pass without loving it gently. Maybe that's all it takes to live well. Paolo walked out of the cafe where he last met Clara. Today there was no letter, no smell of warm pastries, no soft laughter sharing another old story. Only a gentle breeze drifting down the quiet street and the last light of day stretching out like a farewell. He sat on the bench by the porch, quiet for a long while. In his hand was the old leather journal he carried but never filled. Now he knew what to write. He opened it, took his pen, and wrote, "I didn't choose to live longer, but I choose to live gently. Today." A breeze flipped the page like a quiet confirmation. Years later, a gray-haired Paolo would sit by that same cafe window. A new barista worked there. The same breeze still passed by, quieter now. He'd still carry the leather journal, now filled, page after page, with little things like thankful for sunlight through lace curtains, smiled at the dog walker. He often smiled for no reason. People thought he was a kind old man. They didn't know he had met Clara. And now it's your turn. If Clara's words touched even a small part of you, pause. Take one breath. Think of one gentle thing you could do today. Maybe it's texting someone you've been distant from. Maybe it's just placing a flower by your window. Or simply comment below, "Today I choose to live gently." Leave it here like Clara left her letter for someone else to find and feel less alone. If you're reading these final words, remember this. You don't have to be Clara to live like her. You just have to choose one thing she never did. She never let a day pass without loving it gently. Maybe that's all it takes to live well.